Welcome everybody to our second webcast here for our Evolve project, a global crowdfunding project to create a platform for a new paradigm for health in collaboration with professionals, motivated people, scientists, and educators from all around the world. Welcome and thank you for being here. This is an exciting event and we have panel guests today. And I would like to introduce to you who we're going to hear today. And we're starting with David Thompson, the founder of the Evolve project. Hey, David, how are you?
Hi, I'm very pleased to be here and want to welcome everyone back and thank them for tuning in on Saturday. It's 9 o'clock UK time, but thank you for wherever you are in the world for making the effort to come and listen to us. I hope we've got some intriguing evidence and discussion for you over the next hour.
This is myself. My name is Jona Bryndis. I'm the founder of transCODES, and I work as energy healer and train people in all professions to integrate energy work into their existing modalities or practices. So I have a lot of experience that I'm bringing in here. And next to us is Dr. Tasneem Ali. Hi, Dr. T. I think that's how you're being called.
It's Dr. Ali, really, but I'll answer to most things. Good evening, everybody. I'm a GP, work in the NHS in England, in London, and I'm also an angelic Reiki healer and a crystal healer and a solar teacher of the knowledge book. So I live my passion, which is science meets spirituality. So I'm super excited about being here today. So thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for being here, Dr. Ali. This is a very interesting combination of specialties that you're bringing in here, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the future of health education. And the same here with Adrian Taffinder. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You are a subconscious surgeon. How interesting is that? Would you like to introduce to us what this means?
Sure. I mean, as we'll discuss on the what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about emotions, and our past emotions impact our future, and these beliefs cause stress in the body, which change the neurochemistry and all sorts. So, we're talking about the placebo effect, and the placebo effect is all about beliefs, and stimulating our own natural healing is going to be the future of healthcare, and that's what we need to educate people about. I've studied kind of this area for 25 years as a bit of a geeky obsession, and I work with clients all the time on the deep subconscious, and a side product is quite often aches and pains and ailments disappear as we deal with certain emotions. So it's a fascinating topic.
Interesting. Well, this sounds like a very exciting panel here, and there are a few keywords, a few topics that we would like to present to our audience here. So again, thank you for all the audience members and the panel guests to provide this exciting topic here. So let's talk about the future of health education and what the responsibilities are that we are looking at when it comes to healthcare and health education in the future. David, would you like to get started here?
Yeah, let's dive straight in with the primary question of who is responsible for your healthcare, and taking that responsibility and ownership of your current situation is probably the first stage in letting go of whatever ails you at the moment. So we have to shift away from the paradigm of doctor is a godlike figure who we abdicate all responsibility to for our health outcomes, and move towards a model of collaboration where each of us is as important in the health outcome. And actually that goes a bit further than that. If you take full responsibility for your symptoms, you're going to be more ready to let them go. So I don't know if you want to come in from your perspective, Dr. T, on what you see as where we were and where we're going in the National Health Service in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from a perspective of a GP, I can tell you the National Health Service is collapsing. Okay, so in terms of responsibility, the old ideas in the NHS and as regards healthcare was that they pay, a patient pays his taxes and it's the government's duty and the doctor's duty to provide such and such, okay, for all my needs, and I have no responsibility. Then there is a slight shift towards more health promotion, and in the conventional model of healthcare, I would say, each patient is responsible for trying to achieve a healthier state, and this is purely from a physical perspective, okay, their physical body. So you would go for your breast screening, you would stop smoking, you would lose weight, you would do exercise, and so on. These are simple physical things you can do to help your physical body. But now I think the healthcare should change, and it's slow in doing so. It should start to sort of leave the old ways and start adopting the new ways, okay, where everybody has personal responsibility, and we have to understand that this responsibility, it has an impact on ourselves and on us in a social and a global and a universal setting. So promoting healthcare is not just for the physical, it's also so it's not just the body, it's also the mind, it's also the spirit, it's also our higher selves, it's also cosmic and universally. So actually thinking patterns have to change. And it's actually all our responsibility to do this, because we're born into this world for a reason. And it's a cop-out to say it's somebody else's fault for our bad situation. Do you see what I'm saying? So this idea of responsibility, it's actually us taking ownership of our own evolution, if I see it in a broader context.
Certainly. And I want to now move on in terms of when we've taken responsibility and we respect each other's role in the process. So the clinician's role in perhaps offering some guidance, but it's then down to the patient or individual to take responsibility and either follow that, or if he doesn't feel it's right for him, look for an alternative elsewhere. It doesn't have to come from a traditional medical perspective, and it might not be the right one for him. Because if the traditional medical perspective only looks at the physical body and sees the physical body as, the ultimate expression of everything that is, it's a very limited perspective. And we've got a lot of imaging now that shows the chakra energy systems in the body. So it's not that it's a woo-woo concept anymore. These chakras are energetic systems in the body, localized consciousness elements which have specific roles to play and their own related nerve plexuses within them. And they relate to all the glands of the body, the endocrine glands. We recognize this a lot in terms of the specific consciousness elements of them. So if we look at, say, the adrenals, which are related to the root chakra, they've got this consciousness of drive and motivation, willpower, strength, coping, overwhelm, and then paranoia and obsession and fear. So all of those elements can relate to different experiences. And if you neglect the consciousness aspect of an experience, you're limiting it just to a very narrow viewpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I may interrupt, David, just for a moment.
Yeah.
Up to now, conventional medical schools, they teach the old science. They don't teach you about chakras and the consciousness aspects of chakras, etc. So it's very, it's old science. It's, in fact, I was challenged when I came out, so to speak, and sort of publicly stated my views about conventional medicine as well as complementary medicine working alongside each other. It's just not taught at the, taught at medical schools.
No, and this is the issue we have about evidence-led from peer review articles in terms of the delay in an observation and then it being accepted into medical practice. This delay, although it's improving, can be up to 40 years from when someone first hypothesizes it and then produces the first amount of evidence to highlight the truth behind the observation to it actually being accepted and then practice changing. So we're going off a little bit from where we started from responsibility. So let's move on now in terms of accepting that yes, if you've taken responsibility and each person fully accepts their role in the process, then also recognizing how we teach information and how we learn is very important as well, because each of us has a different strength, a different way we like to learn. We can simplify it down to 4 ways differently. So some of us love to receive information in the audio fashion. So being in lectures is a great way to get information. But the reality is a lot of us don't remember much of that information. Around about 8% will go in. So in 2 hours, you're not going to remember much of what was delivered if you're in a 2-hour lecture. So recognizing that some people like to learn through reading books or writing and making notes or doodling, so they visually absorb the information. And then others of us need to have a physical stimulus, a kinesthetic input. So recognizing that as being important to stimulate different neurological pathways and get it ingrained is really important. I don't know if you want to come in here, because I know Adrian's been thinking a lot about the future from children's perspective and education of children. If you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge when we're talking about education is we don't actually educate anybody at the moment. And I think there's one very interesting kind of scientific experiment which was done, which really kind of demonstrates the education system. I mean, if we take the word education, it comes from the ancient Latin word educo. It means to bring out, to induce from within. And we don't do that at all. We batter in information to regurgitate it at a later stage, not necessarily to even apply it. And there's a psychometric test, very simple one. It's like, you give someone a paperclip and say, right, how many things can you make out of this paperclip? So it's a test of creativity, and it's not relevant to age. You can give it to a 5-year-old, and they'll come out with hundreds of ideas. They'll go, oh, if it was 200 feet tall and it was hollow, I could bend it and then make a water slide out of it. So when they give this test to 5-year-olds, 95% test at genius level. But when they give the test again to 15-year-olds, less than 10% test at genius level. So the way we give information and the way we present it, we're not really asking anybody to, be educated as such. What we're doing is we're going, this is what you should learn, and we're going to remove your ability to think about it. So we need to totally and utterly redesign the way we learn. And the challenge is when we get to an adult, we're conditioned in such a way that if somebody turns around and says to you, right, well, you've got this energy system in you and you've got these energy points called chakras. It's an ancient Sanskrit word that means wheel, vortex. And they look at you as if you completely start raving mad. And Dr. T mentioned it was all this old kind of, they're teaching old science. The irony is they've been talking about the chakras for over 12,000 years. It's in many ancient medicines and modalities. So really, it's the new science which is actually holding us back.
Which is ironic, isn't it? And the way we learn and the way we teach, or the way we bring out from people, has to change away from this battering of information into people and come from a curiosity, inspirational perspective, rather than a motivation where I have to drive you in order to make you take the information in, which dulls down that creative function, as you so nicely illustrated. But if we come from a perspective, well, actually we can integrate both functions at once. So you have the logical brain and the creative brain both working synergistically. And in this state, you are probably familiar from when you were on the sports pitch, so concentrated in the moment that you could feel the flow of the game and you're aware of everything going on at the same time, or reproducing information in an exam. Nothing else mattered. And we know this as the alpha state. And we can boost that state even more by having heart-brain coherence. And the interesting thing about the heart as a nerve plexus in itself is that it has a very strong electrical and magnetic field. So the electrical field is actually 100 times stronger than that of the brain, but the magnetic field is 5,000 times stronger than the brain. So if you multiply those together, you have an idea of the improved processing power of the heart brain center compared to like the brain or computer brain center, which is much slower. But if you integrate all of those functions together, you have a very powerful learning tool. And
David, I would like to add something here, if I may.
Yeah.
I've just had a lecture in which I presented the difference between our brain mind and our hard mind, which is now subject to a lot of scientific research. And the way I presented this was, I couldn't find the study, but I'll make an effort to find that, is to show the difference between just being sort of in our logical brain phase as compared to accepting some of our subconscious perception as part of our brain function, so to speak, is through bandwidth. There is a measurement which compares the sensory perception bandwidth of our brain to 2,000 bits per second, 2 megabits, which those of you who struggle with their interconnection know it's quite good. It's quite good. That's the bandwidth of our brain perception, as compared to our heart brain bandwidth, which fluctuates around 4 billion bits per second. And this is, I think, Adrian, you mentioned this in your intro. This is kind of like the core here of the new paradigm, is to understand that there is a sensory system in us, in all of us, that is way more advanced, way more sophisticated than what we just perceive through our conscious thinking. And
incredibly.
Yeah, and the future education really, just like you hinted at, David, with the synergy between left and right hemisphere, as well as certain states of consciousness, brainwave functions, is to educate the mediator between the two, the part in us, what we, due to the lack of better words, just call consciousness at the moment, that can translate the gap between what our conscious mind perceives in terms of logical thinking, structuring, sorting information, and perceiving information, and the part of us that is able to perceive information on a level that is more connected with what we would probably call the collective unconscious, if you will, information that is being carried in our collective field for generations, for millennia, that we all have access to. We just never been trained in that language that can translate this for us into reproducible results, which is
and this is the definition of educo, to bring out, to induce from within. It's accessing that field of information. And I mean, I'm not sure, maybe some of the listeners, I don't know what their experience is about language like this field of information. But if I could give a little example, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, when you're looking at our connectedness and this ability to tap into what some people call common consciousness, source energy, there's lots of different language about. And it was this experiment where they were looking at, do we pass information on through our DNA, through our genes? So very briefly, I'll go over the experiment. It was quite simple. They got a rat, and they made a very complex maze. And they thought, right, if we put this rat into the maze, and it will learn the maze, and over a period of time, it will do it quicker and quicker. So they put it in, and let's say it took 2 hours to do. After putting it in hundreds of more times, it took it down to about an hour and a half. So then they took one of its offspring and thought, right, we'll put that in, and if there's no memory there's no connection, it probably starts off at about 2 hours and then need to relearn it. When they put it in, it started at an hour and a half. It seemed to have the memory of its parents. So then they got a different rat, which was on a different sort of like DNA strain, totally unrelated, same, kind of species, but different family tree, as it were. And then, the rat that they put in second, it started at an hour and a half, and after a while took it down to about an hour and 15 minutes. So when they got this totally unrelated rat, they thought, well, it'll start back at 2 hours again, won't it? And when they put it in, it started at an hour and 15, where the other one left off. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, that's not DNA related, so the information couldn't have come through that mechanism. So they did it again, and it happened again. So they published the results and did this, paper on it. And it was the New York University and New Zealand University picked up this paper. It was like, oh, this is a kind of a strange phenomenon. What's going on here? See if we can actually replicate the results. So they built the maze and did it exactly the same. And they got one of their rats from their country of the same species, popped that in, and it started off at the last rat's results. So even though it was the other side of the planet, they seem to have and be communicating knowledge between them. And we're seeing this on some islands with monkeys, where they started using a tool and started doing this new habit. And an island which was isolated 50 miles away, the same week, the monkeys over there started doing the exact same thing. And we see this phenomena with humans many, many times. People come up with inventions, and 3 or 4 people release this secret invention through different places in the world that are unrelated. So there must be something going on for all of these things just to coalesce and happen all at once and, be so connected.
So this comes back to the field, this concept that everything is connected and interrelated. And in the older language, we'll use the term consciousness, but in quantum physics, we'll recognize it as the field. And the interconnectedness of everything is one of the foundations which I think we should start our medical education from. In fact, probably all of our education programs should start from this perspective that absolutely everything is connected. And if we want to look at where we traditionally start with in medical education, which is cell biology, well, what's happening in the cell? And we look at the cell structure, and you break it down into molecules, and what's in the molecules? Well, you've got atoms, and then you look further into the atoms, and what have you got in atoms? Well, you've got protons, neutrons, and electrons. And when you break all of those down, the fundamental building block is just an oscillation of energy. So everything fundamentally is an oscillation of energy. And if we start there and recognize that actually it's when you get down to those foundational levels of oscillation that everything can be connected and interrelated, because it's all part of the same thing, just manifest physically in slightly different forms, slightly different combinations of atoms to make slightly different molecules, but it's all vibration and it's all energy. So Adrian, sorry, you were just about to add something.
It disappears.
Sorry?
I says, and when we go and look at what that energy is made of and what it is, it disappears. It goes in and out of the quantum field. So technically, the energy that you're made of over a period of time, all of it actually disappears into the quantum field and comes back.
Yeah. So
it's very difficult for people to imagine that we are composed of 99.9% of space in between. And not.
It's actually 10 to the minus 27. 10 to the minus 27 is the particles that we're made of. So 0.00027 times 1, that's the actual matter you're made of, and all the rest is vacuum.
Yeah. As humans, we perceive our physicality as the reality of our being, but in observing what we're really composed of, we realize, I think Dr. Ali, you mentioned this as well, we are composed of much more, and it's not just the nothingness of the space in between, but it's the vibration that makes up the different layers, the different levels of our existence, which the way I teach it here in my ecosystem is as the physical being the densest, the most solid state, followed by the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the etheric, and the energetic. So for me, in my practice here of teaching and educating healing professionals of all different kinds of arts, the biggest shift I notice in awareness is when dividing things down into these different layers of existence, including all of them, and creating more of an acceptance that all these aspects exist simultaneously in form of vibrations, in form of resonances. That's usually how I approach it.
No, sorry.
I just wanted to say, so basically what Adrian was saying earlier is the principles of like a collective consciousness, the experiments you described about the monkeys, and communication. There are other examples of water with DNA in one test tube and another test tube just with water alone, and they were stood side by side, not touching each other in their own test tubes. And then the water without the DNA was then taken away, and they cultured DNA from the water, the test tube with water with no DNA. So that actually meant that the DNA in the test tube with water communicated in some way with the test tube of water without the DNA. And that belief is through their consciousness. There was some communication, like with the monkeys and the collective consciousness, where they began, I believe it was washing potatoes or something in the river, from my reading. So that's the idea of collective consciousness. And then what Jonas was talking about the us being part of something bigger, and the principle of the way I see it is a cell is a universe. So from one cell, you can actually, from a stem cell, you can then create a whole human of 64 billion cells, each part doing their own thing. So from one microcosm to a macrocosm, everything is from the micro to the macro, and the macro to the micro. So everything we are in this existential dimension is actually just a reflection of another higher reality. And I think this understanding is gaining more acceptance in you say new science, but I get what you meant about the old science. But yes,
spiritualists, things like fractal matter.
Absolutely. This is the change in the paradigm, which needs to be. It will be more publicized as more evidence becomes available.
Yes, it's actually reflecting this archetypal conflict that we all have. Is like, are we part of a larger system? And as far as science is concerned, and I totally agree with you, Dr. Ellie here, that we have to look at it in a fractal way, in a holographic way. And when it comes to educating this, it is very difficult to transport the idea of non-locality and fractals, because people think in the segregated, individuated way. And I think the biggest part of the education here, when we approach this in our future courses and platforms, is that we need to include the subjectivity of this. For me, it always comes down to moving the current paradigm from this objectivity that we all have been conditioned to, to like, okay, evidence is only real if it can be reproduced objectively. But when it comes to well-being and healing, fulfillment even, we run into problems here because it's a subjective perception. So I think the biggest shift that we can produce here is when we bring in subjectivity and allow people to define their experience of health and well-being, and therefore sort of shifting the focus away from this measurable solid state type of everything that we called old system here, this Newtonian view of us as almost like a computer, which is not the case. We know today that we are much more complex and that we are part of this universal field here, and we have no idea how far this reaches, obviously, because our mental brain, our brain is too limited to understand non-locality or the fundamentals of a holographic universe. But those are sort of the aspects here that are coming in, and I see, especially when it comes to health and healing, I see the biggest issue in regards to communication and subjectivity, to allow that space and go into this, please explain to me or try to communicate to me how this subjectively feels within you. Does this feel expansive, or does this feel contractive to you? Does this feel like you're empowered, or does this make you feel like you're disempowered? Those are the foundations that I teach, and showing people ways to tune into this inner truth detector, that how I call it, that we all have within us, that is able to discern information, that is able to discern subjectively discern whether an energy or a certain state is conducive or not. And that has to do with accepting subjectivity. The current scientific paradigm does not accept subjectivity. It does not accept a person's judgment of this feels good to me. It will negate.
What you're briefing on is the inner knowing. Is that educo, is that bringing out your inner knowledge, this connection to what you know is true. But the challenge that we've got is, and I'm sure if you ask most people this, it's sort of like, well, when you have an intuitive thought, do you always follow it? And a lot of my clients, they come to me because they haven't been following it and things haven't been going well. And when we kind of drill down into it and we find out what the causality was and, something they did, and I'll say, well, when you did that, you kind of knew it was going to go wrong, didn't you? And they always go, yeah, do you know what I did? I just knew it. It's like, why did you do it? And that's the definition of self-sabotage. But we're conditioned to fear things that aren't kind of presented to us in the mainstream. Oh, it's a bit weird, it's a bit woo-woo, it's a little bit out there, cognitive dissonance all over the place, or I just can't cope with this, or I'm just going to go with what these people say because they look official. Yeah.
So if we kind of bring it back onto where we're going with health education, and we recognize that there's different levels of being, or the different levels of our human experience, and we have this within our common language, but it's not the common experience when you go and see your doctor at the moment. So one of the shifts in the paradigm is to make that knowledge acceptable within the medical fraternity, that it's okay to talk about feelings, emotions, spirit, and these different levels of being, and that actually you can't separate them out. So you can't just go to rheumatology for your rheumatology problem and ignore the impact that it has on the emotional and spiritual aspects of your being, or that maybe it's the emotional and spiritual aspects of your being which is resulting in the rheumatoid problem. So addressing all levels of your being simultaneously as one coherent communication system, rather than trying to separate it out and only deal with one logical system at a time. It really kind of does a disservice to the intricacy and complexity of our experience of being here on this planet as a human, and our interaction with everything else.
Yeah,
and recognize
rheumatism there. And I mean, good studies have found that rheumatism is related to feelings of resentment or wanting revenge, feeling that you're a victim, long-standing bitterness, or having problems with loving yourself and others. So it's what they call the psycho aspect of it. That we now recognise that 80 to 90% of disease has a psychometric element of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is health then? Well, it has to be a reflection of every single aspect of your human being. It can't just be health in body and then ignore the mind, because if there's one aspect out in one part of the body, surely it's going to be reflected in the other levels of our experience as well. So recognizing that that's where we've got to start, and that the doctor can't study absolutely everything. And in the NHS, we talk about the multidisciplinary team so often, but very often that's restricted just to a different perspective on the physical body and a different expertise in addressing a different aspect of the physical body function and its experience in the physical world. Very rarely does that go up to the emotional, and God forbid the spiritual level as well. So let's bring that all and recognize that, yeah, there may be a role for working at the spiritual level, and guess what? You might find your physical symptoms improve when you do.
It's funny you should say that, David. Through medical school, they talk about treating holistically, which is biopsychosocial, but actually it's mostly physical and mental. There is no mention of body, mind, and soul, which is very different, and I think that needs to change. Yeah.
And recognizing the role of the soul as an energetic thing as well. Your soul is in the body, and we know this, physically located in the right atrium of the heart, or the wall of the right atrium of the heart. So, we know where these energy centers are, but because necessarily we don't have the imaging specifically to show soul center, we've ignored the evidence which is presented in so many ancient and well-respected theological texts. We think that they can have no impact on the physical experience, but actually it's very relevant and probably more significant than we currently give it credence and credibility for within our health education model. So this is where we move on to belief systems, and this, I guess, is an area of interest for all of us, but as someone calling himself a subconscious surgeon, maybe you would like to start here, Adrian.
Yeah, sure. When we're talking about belief systems, obviously, you might know Bruce Lipton. He talks about the biology of belief. There's a book by Candace Pert, who's a neuropharmacologist, called the Molecules of Emotion, and there are multiple areas, and without going into souls, and then we're going to look at past lives and all this kind of stuff, or we just stay with the physical body. Bruce Lipton talks about environment. The environment that the cell's in will dictate how healthy that cell is. So there's some more kind of human aspects we've got to kind of deal with straight off, which is nutrition, health, lifestyle, stress, anxiety, and it's the biggest impact on our health is the stress levels. The protection mechanism, which is designed to look after us and save our lives, isn't designed for sustained stress. It's designed to think, oh my God, there's a saber-toothed tiger that's just about to jump out of the grass. I saw something move. I don't know whether it's real or not, but I'm going to start running just in case. But when we're thinking, am I going to pay the bills at the end of the month? Are my kids hanging around with the right people? That is actually a mental health issue. People don't understand and conceptualize that being a mental health issue, because anything that is continually stressing you over a period of time will be stimulating this fight or flight response, dumping adrenaline into your body, which is telling your muscle cells to take on a lot more glucose than it would normally do, which is why you're getting hot and sweaty. There's neurochemicals which are released, which shuts down your internal organs, because what's the point in digesting your food and waste if you're going to be food yourself? So, you know, anybody who's had a big Sunday dinner, you'll afterwards you're like, oh God, you feel so tired. And it's because digesting a heavy meal can be the equivalent of a brisk walk. So your body, if it's going to fight, it needs to basically reserve that energy for fighting or running. Now, if we're going around in a constantly stressed state, what it means is our body is not processing our food correctly, it's not processing our waste correctly, toxins are building up in our body, we've got neurochemistry that's putting our body into a hyper state, and it's not sustainable. So taking just day-to-day anxiety and stress out of people's lives is transformational, is health transformational. And you know, the impact, just that alone, just stopping that process is just, you know, it can be life-changing.
Yeah.
Adrian, I agree with you. How do you teach this? Or what do you teach as major modalities to help people to reduce the overall stress or exposure in their daily lives?
Well, do you know what? I think the simplest lesson that anybody can learn of reducing stress is really not caring actually what happens. And this is Buddhism, attachment. You know, it's attachment to having a particular girlfriend, having a particular job, having a level of income, you know, being somewhere, having something. You know, it is holding on to things that are attempting to leave our lives because we're scared of, you know, not having something, that it causes the most stress on this planet. So being able to detach yourself from these and trust life and things like that is probably the one thing that I help my clients with the most, because when you give them that the ability to detach from the situation, then you can be more objective. You can actually see the solutions a lot better, because fight or flight is freeze and do nothing, because evolution has taught us that if we freeze and do nothing, our chance of survival is vastly increased. But that was true 100,000 years ago. Unfortunately, it's not true today. So, you know, the modalities that I use is, I think one of the biggest one is muscle testing. You know, I do a training program on it where, because the muscle testing works like a lie detector. And what you've got to do is find out what's a lie to you. And if your goal is to earn £50,000 a year, so that will give you a level of income and a lifestyle that is comfortable for your family. But if you muscle test yourself at how happy and comfortable you are to earn it, and you're going weak at £30,000 a year, well, you've actually labelled, for some reason, earning more than £30,000 as danger. Your fight or flight system will protect you at all costs from earning that much money. So when you get to 30,000 and you're thinking about doing more, you'll have panic, you'll worry, and you'll have all this stress associated with it, and you won't know why. You'll have a desire to do it, but have a resistance. So finding those conflicting beliefs, you know, that you want this, and a deep down belief that you shouldn't have it for some reason, that's where most of the conflict lies. And establishing the language that your internal subconscious is saying to you, and then detaching the emotional stress from it, again helps you gain a lot more objectivity, because you're stopping the neurochemistry, which is designed to make you freeze and do nothing.
But Adrian, when the patient is having the panic attack, you know, I think at that initial stage, they're not going to think about detaching and analyzing and so on. So when we're faced with a patient, we have to give them steps to try and calm them down in the immediate situation when they're sweating and their heart rate is racing and their throat is constricting and they're probably going to pass out. So, so the techniques I actually use is, rather than give them Prozac or citalopram or sertraline to calm them down, I would actually teach them mindful breathing, which is very basic. I tell them breathe in to a count of 6, hold it for 2, and breathe out to a count of 8. Just breathing a few breaths like that calms down their physiology. And then I would teach them to go and read an NLP book and learn the tapping technique within it, which takes away phobias. So it's giving them simple steps to start doing to try and reduce that, in their physiology, that hyper anxious state. So it's just 2 simple techniques. It's mindful breathing and tap away the fear and anxiety. So initially they can start with this, and once they're in a calmer state, then you can start introducing to them, planting the seeds into their consciousness about transformation, about going reading other things, expanding their knowledge, expanding their consciousness, detachment and all the rest of it. Because when they're in that hyper state, fight or flight, then everything goes to pot. So I think on a practical level, meditation, mindfulness, these things are really important, and most GPs would steer clear away from these. But patients really appreciate them because they're practical advice on how to cope with it, rather than dishing out the Prozac.
Yeah. So there's lots of different methods for addressing the impact of belief systems as one part, and probably the most significant part, of the epigenetic influence on the expression of genes within a cell, and therefore your health. But it is these outside influences, those epigenetic things, the toxins, the traumas and the thoughts, which are caught up in our belief systems, which really impact the expression of our genes. And the higher level of those more subtle energies, which we represent as the etheric or energetic body, impacting down onto the belief systems, is all important as to be addressed to help impact our experience of health in the physical body. But if we want to move on from acknowledging that the belief systems are very important for establishing a good health, the technique that resonates most is not going to be the same for every single person, which is why it's important to have a diversity of techniques. And we've spoken just about a few of those here. But recognizing that there's not just one thing. So if we have a psychosis, we don't all go for counseling, or we all go for psychotherapy or psychiatric care. It's broader than that, and there's lots of different ways of addressing these subconscious belief systems. And it's not a one-size-fits-all model. But the issue here is letting go of the limiting belief, the thing which is causing the symptoms. And when we let go of that, then we can let go of the symptoms underneath it as well. So if we're thinking
I think
about...
there's one slight challenge we've also got to get over as well, is the induced psychosis that all healthcare should be provided by the government. People give away their power. And, I've had people where, it's like, I know for a fact the muscle testings all said that, processing this out and going through a certain process would get rid of those emotions and it would improve it. But then they think, oh, well, I can get counselling through the health service free, so I'm going to do that instead. And some of these new modalities that, are emerging, subconscious surgery being one of them, they're so much faster, they're so much quicker, they're so much more powerful. But when people have actually got to start paying for their own healthcare, it's still a subject which a lot of people probably either can't afford to do, or it's just not programmed within them to be able to do it.
I'm glad you're bringing this up, Adrian, because I live in the United States and we do not have paid healthcare. We have to pay for it ourselves. It's actually quite expensive here in the United States, and therefore a significant number of the population does not even have health insurance or health care. And it brings in a whole different perspective. I grew up in Europe. I grew up in government syndicated healthcare, and I've noticed a tremendous shift here in attitude towards health in a system where you have to pay for it. So some of the collapse of the government-sponsored healthcare may actually, or I was going to actually ask you this, if you think that this would actually help to increase the personal responsibility and accountability and efficiency. Efficiency, I think here as qualitative aspect, as a major turning point, because if I don't have to pay for any of the modalities that are being offered to me for free, I don't really care how efficient they are. Here in the United States, people have to count the money that they pay for it, and therefore, at least those who do care, who do have a step up to their responsibility, look very sharply at how fast can I get through the system. So what I mean to say is that, do you think that some of the changes that we're experiencing right now will work for us here and to increase the awareness and the accountability?
Well, if I can come back to the UK and say that, yeah, we don't pay for our services at the point of use, but actually we pay for them through our taxes, and it's very important in the US that it's experience and results based, which drives demand. So it's probably more open to change more quickly in the US, because if you're paying for something which isn't getting results quickly, you're gonna shift. But you have to be aware of what you can shift to try a different modality to help you experience that shift, to go and get the meditation tuition, the thing to teach you the heart-brain coherence, to take you out of that anxious fight-flight response and into that kind of more coherent healing response of being in a parasympathetic state. So results-based treatment modalities are really important, and letting the evidence of the experience guide us rather than just the published evidence from the mainstream and the randomized control trials, which are sponsored by very often people with an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, does this actually mean that our biggest issue here and for the future of health education is, without going into conspiracy theories, but is that we have to actually work against the establishment? Because if we teach people that like say this inner truth or lie detector that we talked about, or intuition, or tuning into the inner ability to discern whether something is efficient or beneficial, advantageous, that's actually going against our current healthcare or sick care system, isn't it?
Completely. And the thing we want to say is it's not really so much as a fight to push back against something. It's really to offer a new playground, a new paradigm. And if you want to experience a different or change in health outcomes with different modalities, which may be quicker than your previous experience in the old paradigm, then it's about showing people the resources that are available and putting this directory of practitioners who already understand the breadth of perspective needed to fully address the human energetic being as a whole unit, not just a physical body.
Absolutely, David. Do you know? So really, I think what is needed is a more scientific experiments conducted by people with spiritual insights, so that we can convince the old institutions that really this stuff works. That's the way I see it. So the Bruce Lipton's findings and people of his ilk, as we say, his stature. We need more of that evidence, because at the moment, conventional medical people look at everything through blinkered, glasses, and I think it is to do partly, the big pharma companies, the funding is, there are other agendas, so there is not a lot of money poured into research of this nature. But yeah. I was quite enlightened at the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution, where they presented things in a very scientific way, linking it to consciousness and proving certain things. So that's the kind of discussions we need to be having with the conventional medics and the conventional scientists to implement any change. And that's going to take years, but I think it will come.
If I may,
this
is a big part of our mission statement here. With the Evolve project, to build this bridge between science, between education, between the people who apply and the people who receive, and to provide the funding for research as well as training programs and the practical application of it. This is pretty much exactly what we want to do. David, please correct me here if I'm.
Yeah,
and I think it's politically as well, especially in America. You've got people who are, it's like the chief lobbyist for Monsanto, which is linked with all sorts of pharma and things like that. Their chief lobbyist for 25 years is now, in the government running that department for, the farming and all that kind of stuff. When we're getting people in political positions which have got a vested interest in the industry that they're supposed to be impartial on, this is the biggest problem. It's power, it's money, and we need to get profit and money out of the health system. And this is probably the biggest difference between the NHS and America. In America, in the statute, the law says that the pharmaceutical companies can actually decide what they want to pay their charge for their drugs, and they just put arbitrary figures on, and when they're exported to other countries, they're sometimes thousands of times cheaper than in America. I mean, I do feel sorry for the health system in America. In the NHS, everything's to a price, so they do things on price. But this is the problem. Where it's still then a hierarchical system. You can either afford it or you can't. And we need a more, a system which caters for everybody equally and doesn't discriminate.
Yeah. So there is the beauty of systems like the National Health Service in this country, of making it free at the point of need, irrespective of your income. So we don't check your credit card before we check your pulse.
Yes.
And but we've got to go back to those of us in the world who do have to use our credit cards to pay for health. And a lot of what we're talking about, these subconscious belief systems changing modalities, aren't available on the National Health Service. So people are paying for this in order to have that experience and shift those belief systems. But one of the things we would like to have in this new paradigm for health is that physicians appreciating, because they're all part of this field, this wider consciousness, that they are affected by the people and the emotions who they are there to help recover from the diseases. So there's very often post-traumatic stress experienced by physicians from seeing really traumatic events on a chronic basis. And we want to give physicians the tools to help themselves recover. So, if physicians begin to appreciate and practice the benefits of a meditative practice, of having strong, loving relationships themselves, and a spiritual practice too, they'll be working on their own physical body and have the techniques which can help them and their patients. Because when we're working on our patients, energetically, we're also working on ourselves. Your thoughts don't just go out from you. You're not just a radio broadcaster sending things out. Those thoughts also go inwards. They also affect our own physiology. So if you have a thought, make the effort to make it a kind thought, because being kind to other people, you're also being kind to yourself. I don't know how much this topic is addressed at all in normal medical education, Dr. T. What's your experience of going through it?
Okay, so really for certain disciplines like psychiatrists and counselors and so on, they do advocate that they have a session to sort of what's the word? It's like a mentoring, cathartic kind of session, so that they don't absorb all these energies, and that's part of the experience of their training. But not other doctors have that. We have some mentoring, but it's very much based on the physical, nothing to do with the spiritual. In fact, spiritual is quite taboo at the moment. I just wanted to say, though, in my perfect world, though, I think conventional medicine should stand side by side with complementary medicine. I'm not saying exclude one or the other. I think we should just broadly and holistically accept all modalities of healing, and have an open mind, and sort of seek to try and learn higher truths from wherever we can, because knowledge is interminable. You know, as a doctor, you have to keep doing your CPD, we call it appraisal, reaccreditations with the GMC and so on, and that's so that we maintain our standard of practice. I think we should do that anyway as human beings, you know, always seek higher truths, which is why I studied the knowledge book. So yeah, it's very interesting, and it's an exciting time. It's a period of awakening.
So basically what you're saying is we need to motivate, and I think at this point, the only reason why we focus on physicians is because this is sort of the state of our healthcare right now, that the physicians are sort of the first station, you know, where somebody goes. But we need to motivate physicians as well as all healing practitioners to go into this mode of personal advancement, personal improvement, and opening up for these mindfulness or heart consciousness based modalities. I agree with you.
Also, and I want to add that you know, mainstream medical practice has come in for a bit of a bashing on this webinar, but we want to appreciate and value what they do in emergency medical care, because without that, then there'll be a lot less survival than there is currently from big traumatic accidents. So it's to say that there's a role for drugs and surgery and emergency medicine, but when it comes to chronic health complaints, the modern medical approach to and this is the word which is used, disease management, it's not looking to fully allow you to recover from it, it's to manage your symptoms. It needs a little bit of an external perspective, which is what we hope to provide with these other modalities, and just increasing the awareness and the influence of the other levels of the being to help people move through their experience of the physical body and the mental body and the emotional body and the spiritual body, and recognizing the interrelatedness and interdependence of all of those things. But not that one thing is more important than the other, but they can all be more effective if they are recognized and collaborate together. So this is where we're moving on to the future, where there's more collaboration and not so much fear-based protective and negative advertising between the different disciplines, because ultimately we're all there for the same purpose, to help each other become the best versions of ourselves and have the best experience on this planet of life. So living from a love perspective rather than a fear perspective, and experiencing, you know, that nice parasympathetic restful state as much as possible.
Yes, well said, David. We're coming a little bit here to the place where we would love to involve our audience a little bit and see if there are any questions or comments or things that you would like to contribute, or that you think could help, ideas and so forth, to bring this into manifestation and how to approach this. We have a question here from Sandy, and Sandy brings up an interesting point. She says, what if you treat it like a business and get sponsors for individuals to try different forms of taking care of their wellness in that area. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I want to move away from healthcare as a business. I think profiting from other people's misfortune and experience of ill health doesn't do us as clinicians any favors. So yes, we need money to survive in our current economic climate, but I think we also need to recognize the impact of every aspect of our life on our health experience. So this is why we're coming towards a different perspective of not just addressing the healthcare system, but the Evolve project is going to go a whole lot further and look at every aspect of your life. So making the next stage of human evolution a collective conscious choice to collaboratively create dynamic communities that inspire and support us to be our best selves for the highest good of us all, which recognizes the importance of strong, loving relationships in our experience of health and building community around that, not some rigid structure where everybody has to fit into a cookie cutter sized experience of education modality, but one in which we can really push forwards and allow everyone to become the best versions of themselves, which means having a more holistic approach than we currently do within the healthcare system.
David, as part of this project, then we have to liaise and collaborate with the higher authorities, with the government, with the systems in place, with the NHS, in order to start changes at the top as well, so that they can sort of filter down, to the people who need it. Because it's all very well like doing this in our little groups, and this we're trying to make a start, and that's great, but really we have to think big and also sort of collaborate with the top, because we've got to change the whole ethos, basically to become effective and achieve the dream and the awakening state, which is what we all want. So I think it's very important that we talk to health ministers and people in authority to sort of try and influence them. And partly we'd have to do that by what I mentioned, the studies, gathering scientific evidence about the other modalities is an important way in convincing them at the moment.
Yeah, and recognizing that science actually now is saying the same thing as was being said in the spiritual language thousands of years ago. So science is really the new language of mysticism. But they're saying the same thing, but slightly different perspectives on it.
Although, if I can just kind of interject and be a bit of the devil's advocate here, Dr. T. I get what you're saying, and I appreciate the thought and kind of way it's going into it, but I've got a slightly different opinion. In my opinion, the thing is the pharmaceutical industry, the science, we've actually known this for years. The actual evidence isn't what we're lacking. We have it. It is the motivation. It is the ethics behind it all, and the power and manipulation of big pharma and big money. They know for a fact all of, isolation of compounds is actually more toxic than holistic ways. This is why you get a whole alphabet of contraindications to a particular drug. What they say is, well, you need this drug for your ailment, but you need these 5 drugs to stop this drug killing you. And we know better ways. I think the classic example of this is in cancer treatment. The year that the chemotherapy went into all the medical journals, coffee enemas were removed. And I know it sounds a bit of a strange one, but actually if you look into the Gerson therapy, detoxing the liver of all the toxins of getting rid of the cancer is probably one of the most important bits. Coffee enemas, look into the science, it's incredible the amount of detoxification that it does for the liver. They have about 4 or 5 coffee enemas a day with a very high intense juicing regime. So coffee enemas have no side effects. They work, the vast majority of the time, whereas chemotherapy works 5% of the time, and 95% of the time it actually does a worse job. So the problem is not educating the people at the top. It is getting rid of a controlling system that's only out to earn profit and manipulating government. I know it sounds a bit conspiracy theorist, but actually it's fact. So we need to, it's the old case of we need to build something new that's going to replace it completely. And I think it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down. I think it's too ingrained in the old people. That generation's got to die off. We've got to install it in the new generation. And a very famous person said, if you want to change the world, change the youth. Within 2 generations, you will change the world. Fortunately, he didn't get away with it because that was Hitler. But the psychology echoed throughout humanity, all the time, from a child until he's 7.
Gandhi has a similar... Gandhi has a similar quote, and that is, if we want change, we have to become the change. And Adrian, I just judging by the comments here that are coming in from the audience, people agree with you 100%. So our audience is very strongly on your side here as far as like the impedances, or as far as what we're up against. And I think you summarized this beautifully by saying that we have to create a new platform. We have to be the ones who implement it. We know that the evidence is out there. We are all practitioners here that know it for sure. I've been collecting data for almost 10 years. If there is any type of researcher out there that would like to investigate the efficiency of resonance energy or energy healing, I have tons of data. So the data and the evidence is there. What we need to do, and I think Sandy here, I want to honor what you're saying, is we need to find a way how to fund this. And I agree with some of the things that David and some others have already contributed to our idea. We need to find a way to fund this in a way that it is attractive to other people to collaborate and to invest in this. And David, what are some of the newest sort of developments, or the current state of the Evolve project, and how to fund this? How can we build in incentives here? How can we deal with some of the impedances of attractiveness, so to speak?
Yeah, and we're recognizing with the Evolve project that we can't just address the healthcare system, and it's not just going to the healthcare system and forcing a change in the hospitals, telling them that they're doing everything wrong. It's about creating a whole new paradigm for what's possible and a new playground for that. And that starts with collaborating. We all have to come together to give what we can, because we want a better world, a better system, and we want to leave something which is better for our children, and set them up so that they can have a better experience of health than we did, or are currently experiencing. So it's about us fulfilling our potential. And so rather than just address the healthcare system, looking at the whole of how health is considered in society and how we live our lives, how much time we spend doing tasks which we consider to be stressful rather than helpful towards us. The chores have to be done, but we shouldn't be feeling like we're doing a chore day in, day out, week in, week out, and being in that stress state all the time. So living from a love perspective, with enthusiasm for what we're doing, rather than a fear-based perspective of just trying to save for some arbitrary future, which seems rather purposeless. So having purpose and coming together with a purpose to make this world a better place for our experience now, but also leave a lasting legacy, and creating a platform for that collaboration is the first stage. So right now we're looking for people to help us build the information sharing network, so we can have a directory of practitioners who understand this broader perspective and make it available to as many people as possible with a virtual health reality. Because a lot of these modalities which are new can be done from a distance. You don't have to be in the same room as your practitioner. It can be done via Skype. And as you get more advanced and more comfortable with that, because you appreciate the interconnectedness of everything, you can do it from a distance without having a direct link through a computer screen. But the Internet of Things is really important, and having that communication and awareness of what everybody's working towards. Because ultimately everyone's looking for the best experience they can from this life, not to live a life of misery, although the subconscious programming may be making that their reality. So if we change our subconscious belief systems and allow us to shift into a different reality by working together and making a collective conscious choice to collaborate, to make these dynamic communities a reality that inspire us and support us to become the best versions of ourselves, then we all benefit from that collective raising of our consciousness and the level of thoughts that we have. Because if we carry on watching the TV programs in the state, which we do, tired and in the theta state at the end of the day, then we're going to absorb those negative influences into our subconscious and continue to experience and reenact them in our day-to-day lives, making those negative experiences programmed our reality. Whereas we can change that and make our reality what we want to if we collaborate together. So the state of the project is shifting from one which just looks at healthcare and healthcare modalities to one which looks at the whole experience of our life in our community, and recognizing the importance of community. And it's unfortunate that in a lot of society now, we only appreciate the value of community and our neighbor when something negative happens. But if we could recognize the benefit of our neighbors and enjoy having their company, we might experience a better life than is currently experienced for most of us right now. And we might start working together towards something which we can agree on, rather than our own individual needs. So the collective being greater than the individual. So,
and is this the reason for your suggestion to make this a crowdfunding project?
Definitely. And at the moment, we're just looking to get the official charitable status, so that we don't have to pay so much fees to other organizations. But we're taking and accepting gratefully all donations through PayPal. The website is the World Heritage Healing Center at the moment, and we'll transition that onto the Evolve platform once we have that up and ready, so that everybody can be a little bit more aware of the projects which are happening concurrently, and we can begin to appreciate the level of collaboration which needs to happen and the overlap between all of these products and projects, so that we can share our resources towards our own collective experience being better, and therefore our individual experience being better.
So this is a very inspiring and very powerful what you just said. We are unfortunately running out of time here within the setting, and we want to thank everybody for joining in here. We want to thank Adrian and Tasneem for your suggestions, your opinions and your views. It was super exciting listening to you, and we want to make you curious about our next webcast, which you have to stay tuned for, because we haven't set the date yet, about the evolution of this community that David just visualized or pictured for us, and perhaps also some of the technology that we intend to integrate there. We're aware of the fact that if we want to reach people worldwide, if we want to integrate health education for the youth, that we have to use existing technology and future technologies. And so these things will be discussed in our next webcast, where we're going to go a little more into detail of how to build this kind of community, this collaborative community that David outlined here for us. So thank you, everybody, for your energy, your time, your expertise. Adrian, Tasneem, thank you so much for coming. Contact details and donation details, again, here you will find this at our current website, www.worldheritagehealingcenter.org, and sign up for our newsletter there. This will be an important means of communication for us. This way we can inform you about the next webcast date, and also changes in the structural setup, as well as changes in the website name. Yes, David, you want to say some closing words, or Tasneem, Adrian?
Thank you for the opportunity you've given me to air my views. Actually, what I believe is very concordant with Adrian, in that I do believe that there's this so-called conspiracy theory of Big Pharma and all of that. The point I was trying to make was that if we have the scientific evidence already there, as you said, Jonas, if you said, you have this evidence, what the point I was trying to make was take this evidence and present it, let it be taught in medical schools, let it expand the education of the new doctors of the future. Then we will see true change. That's all I was trying to say, really. But I'm really inspired by what David is trying to do here, and I wish you every success. And I'd be very happy to participate and assist you any way I can. So God bless, and thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you so much, Dr. Tasneem, for coming on and speaking and sharing your views and your experience, and contributing so much. I really appreciate your offer, and we look forward to working with you more closely in the future.
Thank you.
Adrian as well, thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you want to add last minute before we sign off?
Well, yeah, this is, as you know, I'm kind of passionate about this subject, so if there's anybody listening that kind of wants to know more about my perspective and things like that, join me on Facebook, connect with me. And it's about communicating and passing on knowledge. So the more of us that do that, the more it's going to get out there.
Beautiful, thank you. And thank you everyone else once again for tuning in and listening, taking the time out of your Saturday evening if you're in the UK and everywhere else around the world. Thank you. So Jona as well, thank you very much for hosting it and providing the technology to allow us to start having these conversations and putting our perspective out there so that we can shift the paradigm of our experience and begin to collaborate together to make it a reality. So thank you.